Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back for another episode from Where I Sit. I am your host, Dr. C. And because time is of the essence and there is so much to talk about, we are going to dive right into tonight's topics. So, these are the things that we are going to discuss this evening. Jim Crow, and why it was instituted after the United States Civil War, Reconstruction era. The idea of race is simply a white supremacist construct to strip people of color, the African diaspora, of dignity, humanity, rights, and wealth. We will talk about the separate but equal doctrine. We will also discuss the fallacy of the separations of white versus black races. And of course, we will end the show with this particular question. What does all this mean for us today, and what can we do about it? So, as you could probably tell, this evening's topic is about Jim Crow. And we're going to talk about Jim Crow this evening because I think it has a lot. And there is a lot of connection to what is happening right now under the Trump administration, Trump, the new 47th president of the United States, and what that has to do with Jim Crow of the days of old. And as you can see from this particular picture, and by the way, you could just go anywhere in the World Wide Web or the internet, and you can find images like this from all over the internet, talking about or showing you what it was like for African Americans in the South during the Jim Crow era. This particular photo is interesting to me because if you look to the left of your screen, they have right here, true story, Hitler's love life revealed. As if that was really important news to the people in the South. And of course, I'm not talking about black people, I'm talking about white folks during this time, during the World War II period, where they were interested in what Hitler's love life was like. So it's kind of telling in terms of what's important to people during the Jim Crow South, but we are going to dive into it a little bit more so that you have a better understanding of what it was like during Jim Crow and how we relate to what was happening in Jim Crow to what is actually happening now. And of course, the message that I want to give everyone at the end of this broadcast is that we are not powerless uh, to what is happening right now. We are absolutely not powerless. Of course, they weren't powerless during this period either, but people lost their lives in combating Jim Crow back in these days. And of course, there are going to be some challenges for us this time around as well, but we can fight this for sure. All right, so excuse me, talking about Jim Crow and why it was instituted after the U.S. Civil War during Reconstruction. There's a lot here to talk about in terms of why Jim Crow came about. We'll take a look at the verbiage here. Jim Crow laws were a collection of state and local statutes that legalized racial segregation. Named after a black minstrel show character, the laws, which existed for about 100 years, some would even argue that we might be still going through Jim Crow, but it's a whole other discussion for another show. For about 100 years, from the post-war Civil War era until 1968. Yes, think about that. Jim Crow was with us, particularly in the South, from the end of the Civil War, post-Civil War, during right after Reconstruction, all the way up until 1968. So the law was meant to marginalize African Americans by denying them the right to vote, to have jobs, to get a quality education, or any other opportunity that we felt that would advance us as a race. This last line, I think, is very important because it also applies to us today, or that it will apply to us today. Make no mistake about it. Uh, when you look at this last sentence, those who attempted to defy Jim Crow laws often faced arrest, fines, jail sentences, violence, and yes, even death. If we were to get out en masse to protest what is happening under the Trump administration, we probably will also face arrest, fines, jail sentences, violence, and in some very, very rare cases today, quite possibly some death. So the consequences of standing up for what is right during the Jim Crow era and the consequences now are very, very real. So there's a new term that was coined by, of course, I watch a lot of other podcasts out there because there's a lot of great podcasters out there talking about this stuff. And there's one gentleman by the name of Kyle Kalinske. I think it's the Kyle Kalinske Show. And he came up with the term the ethno-state. I call it the white ethno-state. And in this particular case, the making of the white ethno-state. And of course, the Ku Klux Klan had a lot to do with whiteness. Of course, whiteness has been with us from the very beginning when Black enslaved people came to these shores, right? The idea or the construct of being white was coined by those from Europe or European descent. And so this makes sense, right? The making of the white ethno-state. And of course, this all starts, well, it's been with us for a long time, but it really gets magnified during the Jim Crow era, where the Ku Klux Klan, during the Reconstruction era, local governments, as well as the National Democratic Party. Now, I want you to pay really close attention to what I'm about to say. During Jim Crow, the Democratic Party was 100% against rights for Black people in this country. They were not having it, especially after the Civil War and during Reconstruction. It was the Republican Party of that era that made sure the 13th and 14th Amendment were passed, the 15th Amendment as well, to make sure that Black and newly freed enslaved people in this country had full citizenship rights. Okay? The Ku Klux Klan wasn't having it, especially once they saw that African Americans during this time were making great strides for themselves, building their own communities, getting political power, economic power was moving in the right direction. Things were going really well for newly freed people, Black people in this country. But as you can probably tell, things changed. President Andrew Johnson, who became president after Abraham Lincoln was assassinated, thwarted those efforts to keep Black Americans from moving forward. Violence was on the rise, making danger a regular aspect of African American life. Black schools were vandalized and destroyed, and bands of violent white people attacked, tortured, and lynched Black citizens in the night. Families were attacked and forced off their land all across the South. If some of you pay attention, and hopefully you do, one of my favorite movies, The Great Debaters, starring Denzel Washington and various other young actors. There is a scene in that movie where these young debaters from Wiley College had witnessed a black man, just a black man they didn't know, just a random black man that was tortured, hung, and set on fire, right? Well, this is what they did during Jim Crow. And it was all in the effort to terrorize Black people in the South. Now, I'm going to say something else because I think this is important. This just did not happen in the South. This happened all over the country in some of our great northern cities as well, like Chicago, New York, Indianapolis, etc. Black folks were not immune to this kind of violence, even in the North. So, yes, I have these incredible images of the Klan from the past. It's this image on the right in black and white, and of the Klan today. And make no mistake about it, with Trump in office, in this movement for a white ethno-state, the Klan and all of these groups, these right-wing groups, are going to be instrumental in growing their power, which is the reason why on this particular slide, we say the Ku Klux Klan yesterday, today, and tomorrow, they are going to be with us until we fight back and annihilate such bands of hatred and terrorism. Make no mistake about it, the Ku Klux Klan of the past and the Ku Klux Klan of today is nothing more than a domestic terrorist group, in my opinion. So I had mentioned just a couple of slides ago the invention of race as a white supremacist construct. So let's talk about that. You might be able to find this information right here from the 1619 Project. This is an actual book that you go out into your favorite bookstore or book site to pick up this book. There is some really good information in the book. But the invention of race as a white construct, it's important to find out where this actually came from, right? So when one thinks of American Blackness, there is the unsaid ugly truth that nearly all American blacks who have descended from the historical African diaspora in America have one or several rapacious white slave owners in their family tree at some point. And by the way, Dr. C is no different. My ancestors are definitely descended of slaves. There's a lot of us who live in this country that probably know that to be true. Here in the early days of the United States was the invention of racism for economic necessity. From 1619 until 1865, white male Americans chose to breed a Black enslaved workforce through the state-sanctioned rape of Black women to build a new nation and support their white supremacist class. Race became the single unifying identifier determining everything about one's life, starting with this most basic division: enslaved or free. Now, from the verbiage that you see here, there is a little bit more to talk about in terms of this. Also, during the when Black enslaved people first came to these shores, Do not forget that there were also indentured servitude. Most people who were of the indentured servitude class were Europeans, mostly came from Eastern Europe or whatever, right? Now, the big difference from somebody who was enslaved and somebody who was an indentured servant, that indentured servant has a contract. Once they fulfill their servitude through the verbiage of the contract, they are free. They are free to go to do whatever they want to do, right? Whereas enslaved Black people were slaves for the rest of their lives. Now, there is something that's important to talk about when we talk about the invention of race or the invention of whiteness. Obviously, those who were in the indentured servant ranks and those who were enslaved did talk to each other. And what do you think was the most important thing that they talked about? They talked about freedom. They talked about, man, I wish I could make my own way. Wish I could make my own life where I could be successful, etc. They actually talk to each other. And yes, in a lot of cases, excuse me, the indentured servants and the enslaved population would revolt against these cruel white masters. Well, of course, because of the economic ramifications of servants and slaves revolting against their white masters, these white masters took an economic hit, right? Money is the name of name of the game in this country, everybody. If you haven't figured it out by now, you're never going to figure it out. Money is what makes this country go round. Those who have it make the rules. Those who don't get stepped on. We all know that. And so these white slave masters says, oh, we cannot have our Black slaves and our white indentured servants rising up against us. So they devised a plan using whiteness as a tool to separate the indentured slaves, the indentured servants from the Black enslaved population. In other words, this white slave master told these white indentured servants that you're better than these Black slaves. You're white. You're better than them. Look at them. They're savages. You're not. You should be proud of being white and siding with us, the white slave master would say. And it worked. It worked then, and it is working right now. So that brings us to a little bit later on in Jim Crow. They came up with the idea of the separate but equal doctrine. Of course, we all know this to be a fallacy of the separations of the white versus Black races. And the reason why it's a fallacy is because if you look at history during Jim Crow, there was nothing equal about the conditions for those who were in the white populations versus those who were in the Black population. The separate but equal was the infamous justification for the decision in Plessy versus Ferguson, the case that was formerly legal, where the case that formally legalized segregation. The justification behind the decision was that segregation was constitutional as long as Black and white Americans had equal protection under the law. Let's say that again. The justification behind the decision was that segregation was constitutional as long as both Black and white Americans had equal protection under the law. That was not true then, and it is not true now. Can you, if you're listening to the sound of my voice and watching this screen, Can you, I mean, without a doubt, say that anybody that you know who is a person of color that had to deal with the law in this country had equal protection under the law? It is a rhetorical question, but I really want you to think about that. More often than not, the answer to that question is no. And with Trump in office now, it is going to get worse. There is not any equal protection under the law for Black folks in this country. There never was, and there never will be unless we fight for it. We absolutely have to fight for it. This is what Black folks of this time were doing. They were fighting for equal protection under the law because they knew they were not getting it. And yes, it's true, we're not getting it right now. We absolutely must continue to fight for equality in this country. Otherwise, guess what? All of your rights that you now have, if you have any, are going to be taken away. Now, I wanted to, I know there's a lot to read here, and of course, I'll read it for you. And I think it's important to read this because this is from Justice John Marshall from this same case, right? Of course, and Plessy versus Ferguson, they lost that case, right? And so Justice John Marshall Harlan writes this in his opposition to the majority of the justices in the Supreme Court of this particular time. And he says, the white race deems itself to be the dominant race in this country. And so it is in prestige, in achievements, in education, in wealth, and in power. So I doubt not it will continue to be for all time if it remains true to its great heritage and holds fast to the principles of constitutional liberty. But in view of the Constitution, in the eye of the law, there is in this country no superior, dominant, ruling class of citizens. There is no caste here. Basically, he's saying a caste system, which, you know, groups of people are separated along a lot of different lines. Some of those lines would be economic, race, all this kind of stuff. And he's saying that there is no caste here. Our Constitution is colorblind and neither knows nor tolerates classes among citizens in respect of civil rights. All citizens are equal before the law. The humblest is the peer of the most powerful. The law regards man as man and takes no account of his surroundings or of his color when his civil rights, as guaranteed by the supreme law of the land, are involved. It is therefore to be regretted that this high tribunal, the final expositor of the fundamental law of the land, has reached the conclusion that it is competent for a state to regulate the enjoyment by citizens of their civil rights solely upon the basis of race. Now, this is a damning statement, right? He speaks the truth when we really talk about the law of the land. After all, the Lady Justice is blindfolded and holds up a scale where you would put every human being in this legal system of ours strictly as that, as a human being. The idea that somebody is more superior because they are white or any other ethnic group is simply outrageous in this country, especially with the laws that we have on the books here. And I want you to think about this, right? Supreme Court just gave a man, not a white man, but a man, supreme authority as president of the United States, where this person could do practically anything he wants just because he's president of the United States. They basically have made anybody who is a president in this country to have carte blanche to break the law as they see fit, as long as it is painted as an official act, blanket immunity. They abdicated their own sense of reality in holding up this man as more than just a man, just because he's president of the United States. Not to mention the fact that he happens to be a white man. Do you think, I mean, honestly, do you think that if former President Barack Obama was wanting blanket immunity, that they would have given it to him? These same justices that gave this blanket immunity to Donald Trump? Do you think that they would have gone as far as to say, yes, because this man is president and he happens to be a black man, we're going to go ahead and give him blanket immunity? I think not. The statement here from Justice John Marshall Harlan speaks the truth. And it flies in the face of the Trump administration and those he has surrounded himself with in terms of what the law really says. Charlie Kirk, who is, he's a white nationalist. And he was quoted just about a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, as saying that Black people hate white people and they are beneath us. And so we have to fight back by taking all of their rights away. End quote. Now, of course, I paraphrased everything that he said, but he did say that. He said that Black people hate white people and therefore we must take all their rights away from them. Black people don't hate white people. What Black people don't like is the way we are being treated in this country, the so-called land of the free. We're not free. The white ruling class in this country makes sure we are not free. That's what we don't like. Which brings me to my favorite slide. So, yes, this is my favorite slide because guess what? The images speak for themselves. My favorite being here, Elon Musk flashing the Nazi salute. And if you look at the background, you see all these folks here, they're smiling and cheering it on. Yes, baby, white power all the way, baby. It's my favorite. And of course, this is from the Observer. I think this is a magazine at Project 2025. And of course, it's a cartoon clip of Trump also doing the Nazi salute. And of course, this one of Donald Trump as the mustache man. I've listened to a number of other podcasters out there, and they call Hitler the mustache man. I guess they don't want to offend anybody, but you know, we're not going to do that on this show. Let's be real. Let us be honest with each other. The kinds of things that MAGA, Trumpism, Trump himself, and those around him They absolutely, positively believe that the white race is superior to all others. And they are going out of their way to make sure that we all know it. And if you haven't been paying attention, they are following the Project 2025 playbook to the letter. All of Donald Trump's executive orders are all based on Project 2025. If you haven't read it, you need to. If you've read it or you browse through it, you probably need to go back to it to see what they're actually doing. That's what they're doing. They're following this playbook to the letter. And in doing so, they're rolling back civil rights orders and legislation. They're deeming DEI as the new N word. Although I would, I would like to confess that diversity, equity, inclusion, the program of DEI has probably helped white women more than any other group in this country. In fact, the numbers just recently came out that when a government agency or a corporation that was using DEI and hired somebody using that program, 78% of those candidates were white women. 78% were white women. Only 2%, only 2% under a DEI program were those people African American. And of course, the rest was various other subgroups out there, right? 78% of those who were boosted up by DEI happened to be white women. The other thing that the Trumpism in Project 2025 in the making of the new white ethno-state is that they are expecting us to be afraid and to be paralyzed to get what they want. They are using a fire hose of propaganda that overwhelms their perceived enemies. And of course, if you're from the Black community, you're an enemy to these people. And the fact of the matter is that we need to know that that is their strategy. That is their playbook. There is of course, I'm a student of history. I love history. And there was a quote by during World War II, Admiral Yamamoto. I think that's Admiral Yamamoto. This is right before World War II kicked off between the Japanese and the United States. And he was talking to an American naval attaché officer, and he said to him, he says, I studied abroad, went to these Western schools in the United States of America because he felt that it was worth getting to know your adversary. That's what he said. And so we must do the same thing so that we can combat this war that the new or the neo-white ethno-state is launching against us. And I'm not just talking about African Americans, I'm talking about all other ethnic groups out there that they deem as enemies of the state. We need to get to know what they are all about so that we can fight back. Which brings me to this particular slide. And I think this is really important because I'm asking you, what can you do about this? Okay. Yeah, there's a lot that you could do. These are just a few points, but there's a lot you could do. And as we put up our show every week, we're going to give you tools, strategies, and tactics on what you can do to fight this, right? Of course, the first thing I have up here for you is review Project 2025, get his ebook on Audible or summary or of what they are planning and implementing as we speak. They are working on Project 2025 right now. If you go back and take a look at all of the executive orders that Donald Trump has signed, These are all things that you will be able to find in Project 2025. You need to read it and understand it and find out what they are planning or what they are doing to us so that we should be able to fight back. Now, my next point here is very important, but look, and I'm going to speak to you with some experience about this. Contact your Congress leader or senator and demand that they block their efforts at all costs and rally others in your community to do the same. We need to enlist our political leaders to fight back, right? They must fight back. Okay. Now, like I said, I do have a little bit of experience with this. I did this today. You should do the same. I contacted, because I live here in Georgia, I contacted Senator Ossoff, Senator Warnock, and my Congressman, David Scott. I contacted all three of them, imploring that they fight on our behalf. I did not hear anything back from Ossoff, and I did not hear anything back from Warnock. And of course, I have enlisted Warnock to fight for me for some other things that's going on in my life, which I will share with you later in another podcast. But both senators did not get back to me. David Scott did. Okay. He got back to me. Somebody from his staff got back to me. So you gotta keep forcing their hand. FDR, as Franklin Delano Roosevelt was famous for saying to one of his constituents, the Black constituents that was imploring him to fight for our community back in the 40s. And Franklin Delano Roosevelt said, I agree with your case, right? I agree with the case that you're making here. He said he agreed with them. But then he ended that statement with saying, so now he's talking to his constituent, the voter, he said, now it is up to you to make me do something about it. Right? Our involvement in this democracy does not begin with the vote or end with the vote. That's just one very small part of us as citizens of this country and making this democracy work. We also have to contact our congressman, our senator, our governor, our councilwoman, or mayor, or whatever the case may be. We have to make them work for us. Just voting is not going to cut it. Democracy is a verb. You have to make it work for you through action. That's what you need to do. Third point, share information about the neo-white ethno-state movement with others. Yes, it is out there and it is gaining steam. You need to go to reputable sites to get information that is true and share this information with everybody. You need to share this information with people so that you can empower them to act with you to get stuff done on your behalf, on behalf of the Black community. Now, this third point is also very interesting. I had just recently come across, and we're going to talk about that in my next podcast, my next episode, came across a video from a gentleman that has been looking at this past election. And he was out on video, and I've shared this video with a number of people. I've shared it with Senator Ossoff, Senator Warnock, Congressman David Scott, and NBC. I shared this video where the information, the story is explosive. This researcher, by the way, has been doing work in the federal government, has done work for the NAACP. He knows what he's talking about, and his story is factual. He basically says that Donald Trump stole this election, and no one is talking about it. we must discuss it. And I'm going to share this video with you on my next episode so that you can get a hold of it and share it with people you know so that we can act upon it. Like I said, I shared this video with my political leaders here in Georgia. And yes, I sent this video also to NBC. And yes, NBC did respond to me. Whether they're going to do something about it is another story, but at least they did respond. Okay. Fourth point, get your financial house in order, save your money. If you could be selective where you shop, do not support companies that support fascism. That's the name of the game. Back in the day, when the folks, the Black community was moving in the civil rights movement, one of the slogans that they had, don't shop where they will not hire you. It's the same thing, right? Save your money and shop with those companies that are going to support you. I will go a little bit further and say, keep your money within the Black community. Find a Black-owned business in your community that will give you products and services and support them, and urge others to do the same. So, still talking about this, right? There's lots of stories out there. Hopefully, you're paying attention like I am. There, that Target, which is a great company. I love Target, right? Got rid of their DEI program. They were pressured to do so. And of course, a number of people from the Black community says, well, we need to boycott them. Well, yeah, okay, I get that. Yeah, you might want to boycott them, but you also have to think of it this way. A lot of these very large corporations, especially the retailers like Target, Walmart, etc., they do have product on their shelves that come from all over, and a lot of their vendors happen to be Black owned. So you might want to go ahead and boycott, but don't boycott those Black entrepreneurs, vendors that are trying to make a living themselves, just like you. Or better yet, get the community together to launch a boycott that is going to be long lasting and is going to make a difference. You want to boycott to affect a change, to get companies, organizations of any kind to do what you want them to do. Why do you think, I want you to think about this. Why do you think that we're having to deal with MAGA right now? We're dealing with MAGA right now because the neo-white ethno-state has been busy since Reagan to get where they are right now. They've been busy. They've been working. We need to match that kind of work with the same vigor that they have in fighting neo-white ethno-state movements in this country. This is just as simple as that, right? And of course, down here with the final statement, which I said before, don't shop where you can't work or thrive in a career based upon your merits. That's it. Again, there is going to be a lot more that we're going to share with you. I have a confession to make also. I was originally thinking that I was just going to do one podcast a week. I don't think I'm going to be able to do that. I think I'm going to have to release something probably every other day and eventually probably every day, because there's so much to talk about. There is so much to do to fight this evil. So much to do. So you're probably going to start hearing and seeing a lot more podcasts from me. In other words, resist by any means necessary. Of course, by any means necessary, coined by my main man, Malcolm X, right here. That was a fighter. That was a fighter right there. Malcolm was a fighter. Dr. King was a fighter. We can match their vigor, their fight with what we can do right now. We cannot allow these men to have died in vain, especially if all of this is taken away. We don't do anything about it. These men died in vain for our Black community and beyond. They fought for everybody, but they mainly fought for us. We need to do the same for their legacies. We must resist by any means necessary. Just like Malcolm did. He gave his life in doing so. We need to do the same. I'm not asking you to give up your life. I'm asking you to do something. Yeah, you might feel a little pain in doing so, but is it going to be worth it? I think it is. I think it's worth it to do that, right? You got to resist by any means necessary. Now, I want to thank you for joining me this evening. Thank you for visiting from where I sit. Please comment. I've asked you guys to comment on some of our other previous broadcasts. I'm asking you to comment again. And please, please do subscribe. I've noticed that I've been getting a lot of people who are watching the shows and listening, but they're not subscribing. Could you please subscribe? Now, of course, I'm early in the game here, and I got 8 subscribers. I'm proud to say that. I've only been on for a couple of weeks, but I would like to get at least into double digits. All I need is 2 more subscribers to make it up to 10 into double digits, and then we'll set a new goal. So thank you for visiting from where I sit, and please, please, please do make sure you comment and subscribe. And lastly, share with the members of your community. And good night.